What's going on, everyone? It's Ben with YGO from Zero, back with another SDYK format duel. And this time we're going to be diving into Mill. So, as you might have seen, yesterday I released a video that was sort of an update for the format, sort of an addition to my previous guide, which basically said that through playing some games with the deck and doing even more solo testing that I had done previously, I had come to the conclusion that Mill was actually the best deck in this format. And this may seem weird at first because this deck seems kind of silly. It seems kind of like it's going for a win condition that it can never hope to achieve. But I hope that the duels that I'm going to show today and tomorrow will help illustrate how powerful this deck can be, even though it may seem like a joke at first. So, let's dive into the deck breakdown here. So, if you don't know, Mill is a strategy that aims to win by causing their opponent to run out of cards in their deck to draw, and winning through deck out. So, the main way that it does this is it stalls the game for long enough until their opponent has like maybe 12 or 15 cards left in deck with 4 or 5 cards in hand, and then it aims to activate 3 card destructions in a row to cause their opponent to draw through their entire deck and run out of cards. I think that this is one of the most difficult decks in the format to actually play correctly because there's a lot of moving parts that you have to consider when you're playing this deck. You need to keep an eye on both the number of cards in your opponent's deck and in your deck because you can easily wind up milling yourself to death through the repeated use of card destruction at the end of the game. And in addition, you've got to keep an eye on your life points because repeated uses of Ultimate Offering can drop your life total to dangerously low amounts. And there are just many sort of resources to manage in this deck that can take some getting used to. So I do think that this deck is probably one of the more difficult decks to play, but I also think that it is by far one of the best decks to play in the format. And I think it actually is the best deck to play in the format to the point where no other deck besides a deck that's specifically built to counter it can actually deal with this. So let's dive in to the card by card. For our monsters, we're just maxing out on defenders and monsters that we can bring out off of Ultimate Offering. So we have 3 Aquamator, 3 Mystical Elf, and 3 Spirit of the Harp for our 2K defenders. These are monsters that are really hard to get over for our opponents and can just stick around on the field if they don't have any form of removal. We have 3 Man-Eater Bug and 3 Wall of Illusion. These are mainly to bring out off of Ultimate Offering to clear your opponent's field a bit, and in the case of Wall of Illusion, to potentially put a card back in their hand to make card destruction even more devastating. Now, as I just alluded to, all of these monsters you generally want to summon off of an Ultimate Offering, so that way they can avoid your opponent's removal and survive potentially a battle phase to prevent you from taking damage. But they're honestly all pretty good to set as well. And if your opponent does use Change of Heart on a lot of the 2K defenders, since most of them have 800 attack, you're not likely to take a huge amount of damage from your opponent attacking in with them. Moving on to the spells, we of course have 3 card destruction. This is the card that really enables the strategy to be as good as it is. It makes it so that you don't have to wait a full 35 turns for your opponent to run out of cards in their deck, and you can actually end the game a lot quicker with repeated usage of these cards, which you'll see in these games. It can also be used to sort of unbrick your hand if you're in a really dire situation and you really need to draw deeper into your deck to ensure that you actually get cards that will let you survive. Then you can use card destruction here to discard dead cards like potentially duplicate Ultimate Offerings and draw deeper. This generally isn't how you want to play the card, but the fact that it can be used in this way just makes the deck that much better and more consistent. We also have 3 Dark Hole, 3 Raigeki, and 3 Fissure. These are to remove our opponent's threats after they bring them out. They're not really effective against something like the Wicked Worm Beast, but they're effective against pretty much everything else. So these are still very useful to have. We, of course, have 3 Pot of Greed to draw deeper into our deck to draw our engines, but more importantly, to draw into our card destructions when we're making a big push at the end of the game. This deck is kind of unique in that you generally don't want to activate Pot of Greed right away, because doing this will actually clutter up your hand with cards that you may have to discard because you've reached the hand size limit, or cards that will just prevent you from more easily decking your opponent out while also not decking you out. So generally, these Pot of Greeds are best at the end of the game, where you are just trying to make sure you draw into all your card destructions to make a huge push at the end of the game and deck your opponent out in one turn. So it's played a bit differently from how it is in other decks, and it's just an all-around great card, even in a deck that's main goal is to deck out the opponent while making sure they don't deck out. So, very good card. Lastly, we have 3 Swords Revealing Light, a great stall tool. Yes, Dispel is in the format, and yes, Dispel can get rid of Swords Revealing Light, but it's still worth playing them just to potentially stall your opponent for 3 turns if your opponent isn't playing a Dispel in the main deck, or if they just don't draw it. So very good stall card, even when there's a direct out to it. And now for the traps, we have 3 Trap Hole to prevent our opponent's monsters from sticking. This is one of the only ways we have to destroy the Wicked Worm Beast, so it's very useful. We have 3 Ultimate Offering, which arguably is at its best in this deck because it's great for bringing out defenders, but also if we draw multiple copies of it, we can always just card destruction them away. So we play 3 for maximum consistency, and also because we don't really care if we draw duplicates. And lastly, we have 3 Waboku, just one of the most powerful cards in the format, especially in a stall deck, prevents your opponent's really offensive pushes from going through, and can really be very clutch at the end of the game for preserving your life points. Can also be very useful at the end of the game for clearing up spell and trap card zones, for you to set spells and traps from your hand in preparation for card destruction, since you can just activate this during your turn, and you can activate multiple of this during your turn. So if you have these already set in order to potentially prevent your opponent from attacking in, and you realize that you can actually just kill them through deck out, you can just flip these both up, send them to the graveyard, and then set whatever cards are cluttering up your hand to make sure that you don't deck out off the card destructions. So it actually serves some very interesting uses in this deck, more so than just protecting your life points. And then moving on to the side deck, we have a Smokescreen side, basically into just Worm Control. This deck can basically just play full-powered Worm Control in games 2 and 3 if it wants to, just by swapping out all the 2K defenders. There are 9 of those, swapping out the card destructions, that brings the total up to 12, and then swapping out either a Swords Revealing Light or swapping out the Fissures. It's just an incredibly powerful Smokescreen side, especially given because I personally think that Worm Control is the best aggro deck in the format against other aggro decks. So it's just incredibly good. But now that I've covered the deck details here, let's dive right into a game. Okay, we've got a duel against Duck-Based Pill here. They're playing Tribute Aggro, we're playing Mill. Let's see how this game goes. As an interesting note, I am pretty sure that Tribute Aggro is actually the best aggro deck to play against Mill. I think it's got the best matchup because the Change of Heart plus Summon Skull combination could be very useful at just outing hard to out 2K defenders, and also Summon Skull can just get over 2K defenders naturally. So it's just a very good matchup for it. But even then, Mill is just so oppressive that it can just play through it, as we'll see here. So we draw for turn. We do have 2 Pot of Greeds in the opening hand, so we will use one. And we will use the second one. This may have been a bit greedy here, as generally you want to use the Pot of Greed near the end to draw into your extra card destruction. But we really wanted to see an Ultimate Offering here to protect our defenders a bit more, to make it so that they aren't really vulnerable to removal. So we did use both copies of Pot of Greed that we drew right away, which does put our deck count below duck-based pills here, but we can generally get around that at the end of the game if we play our card destructions wisely. We're just going to set a Woboku, set a defender. If they have like a change of heart or some removal, that's okay. We do have the Woboku to prevent huge amounts of damage. But let's see what they do. They've got a Pot of Greed, and they will just change of heart our Spirit of the Harp. And they are going to tribute off for a Summon Skull here and attack in. We'll just Woboku this, since 2500 is a fair amount of damage to take. And so we're just going to preemptively use up the Woboku. They'll set one and pass back to us. We drew Wall of Illusion, which is good if we'd have an Ultimate Offering, but unfortunately, we do not. So we're just going to set the Dark Hole as sort of a bluff. And it's also good to set, as we're very likely to use it at some point in the game. So it's not the worst set that we could bluff with. We're going to Pot of Greed again, and now they're below our deck total, which is pretty good. So that's 1 on swords, and we finally drew an Ultimate Offering, which is incredibly good for us. We're just going to set that guy right down right away. They're going to set one monster of their own. I think they're probably trying to bluff that they have a Trap Master in order to get us to use removal, but they're also at the 7-card hand limit, so it makes sense that they're just setting a monster, since they'd have to discard it anyways. And they'll pass. It will just pass back to them because swords is up. Not like they can do anything against it. They'll set another card to avoid having to discard a card for hand size. Our swords are finally expired. We're just going to fire this Dark Hole, clearing both their monsters. And we're just going to set a Raigeki so we don't have to discard it and pass turn. They'll summon out a Battle Ox and attack in. We're just going to use the Ultimate Offering, pay 5, set a defender. They will run into the defender and just Fisher it away. I think they probably could have saved the Fisher till next turn, but I really don't think it matters because we're just going to bring out another defender with Ultimate Offering anyways. We drew a Fisher of our own, so we'll use it on their Battle Ox. Just clear away some of their monsters. They're going to Pot of Greed again, getting themselves even deeper into the deck. And they'll attack with Battle Ox. We're just going to set another defender. They'll run their Battle Ox into the defender. And they're going to Fisher away our Spirit of the Harp. We're just going to pass back to them. We're feeling very good with this Ultimate Offering. So we'll just keep it here. They're going to attack him with the Battle Ox. We'll pay 5. We'll set another defender. And they're not even going to attack into it. They're just going to set 2 of their own and pass. So I have the read that that's a Maneater bug because they didn't actually try and remove our monster, and they set that. So I have the read that's a Maneater bug, so we can just use Raigeki here. I activate Pot of Greed here because even if we draw 2, we'll still be above our opponent in terms of deck size. So it's not the worst thing to activate here. And I'm just going to fire the Raigeki, clear the Maneater bug and their Battle Ox, and then set a bluff and pass. They're going to Change of Heart the Spirit of the Harp, and they're going to bring out a Summoned Skull. We're going to pay 5 and set Wall of Illusion. Now, we could have set Maneater Bug to destroy the Summoned Skull instead of giving it back to them, but I think this is better because it's harder for them to get the Summoned Skull out of their hand, and also this puts another card in their hand for our card destructions later. So they'll attack into the Wall of Illusion. Summoned Skull will bounce to hand. They'll set 1, pass back to us. We'll just pass back to them. We're fine with this board state. They'll bring out Login. We'll pay 5 and set the Maneater bug. And they're just going to pass because they're a bit scared of our set. If it's Wall of Illusion, then that Login will bounce back. So they're just not going to attack. We'll just Fisher their Lodge in and pass back to them. We could have flipped up the Man-Eater bug and gotten in for damage, but if we did that, then we open ourselves up to taking a fair amount of damage, since bringing out a monster with Ultimate Offering won't be able to block from our Man-Eater bug. So we're just going to use the Fisher. And they're going to Dark Hole away our Man-Eater bug, but we were able to use it to block an attack, so that's pretty good. They're bringing out Lodge in and attacking directly. We'll just set a Mystical Elf, deal 2 damage to them, and they'll pass back to us. We drew yet another Defender. We're feeling pretty good. They draw yet again, bring out their Summon Skull, and attack into the Mystical Elf. That is perfectly fine by us. We drew Waboku, which is an incredibly good draw. We're just feeling perfectly in control here. They're just going to go straight to attacking with the Summon Skull. We'll set a Wall of Illusion, bounce that skull back to their hand, and they're at 5 cards in hand and only 17 cards in deck. If we can pull off a triple card destruction at some point soon, then we could potentially just win the game. They're going to set 1 and pass to us. We are just going to Dark Hole that just in case it's a Man-Eater bug, and we are correct. And we'll just set this trap hole and pass back to them. They're going to bring out Neo and attack directly. We're just going to bring out a Defender, prevent them from attacking. They'll take 300 more. Pass back to us. We drew Man-Eater bug, which is very good for the follow-up. They're going to Raigeki our Aquamador and then just try to get in with the Neo. We'll pay 5, set Man-Eater bug, clear it away, and they pass back to us. We just have 2 Ultimate Offerings in hand, so we are going to fire the card destruction now because these Ultimate Offerings are useless, and we don't necessarily want to waste a Trap Hole or Waboku. So we do want to draw deeper into our deck for something better, and also making them draw 4 cards out of a 15-card deck is very, very good for us, as it will drop them down to 11 cards with 4 cards in hand, which means that they'll be very vulnerable to future card destructions. So we're just going to card destruction now. We draw 2 off that. They'll discard 4 and draw 4. And we have 2 great cards that we can bring out off of Ultimate Offering. So we're feeling pretty good about that. They're going to Reborn back their Summon Skull, which is perfectly fine by us. We can just pay 5, set Wall, and they will attack in, and that Summon Skull will return to their hand. Now, if we can double card destruction, we actually win here, but it's kind of unlikely since we would only be drawing 1 card off of a card destruction anyways here. So what we're actually going to do is we're just going to set another card and just keep building on our stall strategy. So we Trap Hole their Neo. They pass back to us. We keep this Dark Hole in hand in case we do draw a card destruction. It's 1 more draw off that. They don't have anything to do, apparently. Yeah, they've just got the Summon Skull and a bunch of removal. So, yeah, they can't really do anything there. They could set some of their cards to potentially just prevent them from losing to double card destruction. But, I mean, even if they set, they'd have to set 3 cards here. So activate Waboku preemptively and then set 3 of their spells or another Waboku. And they'd still be at 3 cards in hand, which off of double card destruction would still be pretty brutal for them. But we don't have that. We're just going to pass back to them yet again. They will set again, and we have a card destruction here finally. That means that they're going to be discarding 6 cards and then drawing 6 cards. So going down to 1 card in deck. And we do draw another card destruction as well. So we just win that game outright that turn. And I hope that shows how powerful the sort of stall mill aspect of this deck is. We didn't even do the big sort of just blowout at the end of the game where we just activate 3 card destructions in a row. And we were still able to win just on the merits of stalling alone and activating at least 1 good card destruction. So it just shows like how devastating this deck can be when you don't have to fit in like extraneous pieces that don't really stall well, like Exodia pieces, and you can just focus on fitting in all the great stall tools that you need, fitting in all the great removal tools that you need, like fishers and things like that. It just shows how good a stall strategy can be when it's unencumbered by those sorts of restrictions. But now we go into the side deck, and for the side deck, we are siding out of all our defenders, we're siding out of our card destructions, everything that I mentioned in the deck breakdown, and we're siding into worm control. So let's see how this does against their deck. And this is not the best hand. Oh, well, it's got a Wicked Worm Beast, so actually this is the best hand. They're just going to bring out a Neo. We're just going to trap hole that because we're just trying to be as aggressive as possible, hoping that they took out a lot of their trap holes and other sort of things that can mess up our deck. They're going to activate a card destruction of their own, and I actually really like this as something that you can side in against Mill, because the idea basically is that Mill really wants to hold on to their card destructions in hand, and they also want to control how many cards are in their deck versus how many cards are in their opponent's deck. So siding in a card destruction against Mill can actually be really, really devastating if you use it at the right point, because it can both cause them to lose access to some of their card destructions and also turn the tables on what the deck count is, as you'll see here, because this card destruction will actually force us down to 32 cards here, as opposed to our opponent's 33. So that would actually be a huge, huge swing if we were still on the stall Mill strategy. Unfortunately for our opponent, we are on a smokescreen aggro strategy now. So that is a lot less effective against us than it might have otherwise been. We're just going to bring out a Lodge in, attack in, and they do have a Wuboku still in the deck, which I actually potentially would have sided that out if I was going against Mill, but I guess this is safeguarding against sort of this smokescreen aggro strategy here. They're going to pass back. We just bring out Wicked Worm Beast and we'll just attack in because we don't need to overcommit to the board. Just this is a good enough clock as is. 3,200 per turn means that if they don't have something, they're just dead next turn. So we'll just pass it to them. They're going to draw. They are going to Dark Hole our Lodgin. I think this is a good play. It makes it less likely that we'll be able to kill them next turn. And they're just going to bring out a Neo and attack in. We'll just take it. We don't really mind that. And we have a Lodgin of our own. So we'll summon the Lodgin, then activate Raigeki. Just trying to get in for maximum damage here. And we do. We get in for 1,800. Then flip a Swords just to protect our Lodgin from any attacks and reinforcements and the like. They will Raigeki our Lodgin, but we have a Battle Ox, so we're just going to attack in with that. And they will Wuboku, which I think is fair, because that protects them from losing. We'll pass back to them, and we're feeling pretty good. They do have Monster Reborn to bring back a Lodgin here, which does put a bit of a dent in our plans. But we do have a Maneater Bug that, if we can flip it up, can clear their Lodgin, which is pretty good. We'll set a Reinforcements and pass back to them. They're going to Raigeki our board, unfortunately, and pass back to us. They still have the Lodgin there. We're going to set Wall of Illusion in the hopes that they do attack into it with Lodgin and give us back our monster. And we'll also just set a Wuboku. They'll pass back to us. They do not want to risk it if it is a wall, so they're just going to pass back to us. We'll bring out a Wicked Worm Beast and attack in, hoping to leverage our reinforcements and get over their Lodgin. Unfortunately, our opponent also has reinforcements, so we will lose 400 there, but we're still in a pretty good spot. They're going to bring out a Lodgin and attack into wall. We will Wuboku this just to bounce back that Lodgin and keep our wall on the field. and they'll just pass back to us. Pot of Greed's probably the best draw we could have gotten there. Waboku and Ultimate Offering are both very nice. We'll just switch Wall to Defense, pass back to them. And they're actually going to Dark Hole, so clearing their own Lodge in to clear our wall. And they'll bring out the Lodge in, we bounce back to hand. And we're just going to Ultimate Offering, set Maneater, pass back. We are going to flip up the Maneater to pop their Lodge in and get in for a little bit of damage here. So 450 at a time, you know, it still kills them in 2 turns. They're going to bring out Neo, attack in. We'll take it. Let the Maneater bug die. They'll set 1, pass back to us. And Change of Heart is probably one of the best draws we could have gotten. Let's just take their Neo and attack in for potentially lethal damage. Unfortunately, they do have a Waboku, but we were able to use that up, which is pretty good. We're going to activate Swords and pass the Neo back to them. And they're just going to set 1 and pass. Now, we could set the Maneater here to potentially pop the Neo or whatever they have set. But we have an idea that that set card is likely a Maneater bug, because that's basically the only card in their deck that they would set anyways. So they're just going to pass, and we're going to pass. We're just waiting for a board clear, really. And we drew another Swords Revealing Light, so we will be able to actually use that and pop their Maneater bug with its own effect, which is pretty nice. They do draw a D-spell to deal with our swords, which is pretty unfortunate. But we do have good Ultimate Offering targets in hand to bring out. And they're just going to bring out Summon Skull, which is very nice. We're going to pay the 5, set Maneater. They're going to attack it, and unfortunately for them, it's a bug. So we will be able to destroy Summon Skull. They can bring it back with Monster Reborn, which is not that bad, and they'll pass back to us. Wall of Illusion's one of the best draws we could get there, just because it lets us bounce the Summon Skull back to hand, which is great. They're going to attack with the Summon Skull. We'll pay 5, set our wall, and we'll just let the wall die and bounce back their skull. We are going to pay 5 to summon out a Battle Ox of our own. This was just a misclick with the Wabokus there. And they're just going to attack in. So we'll activate the Waboku, enable our Battle Ox to survive, and just they don't really have anything else. They have Monster Reborn to bring back a Lodge in, but that's it. And we just drew Pot of Greed to let us draw our own Lodge in, which is just game over, because we attack our Lodge into theirs and then attack directly with Battle Ox. So I hope this sort of showed the power of this smokescreen side strategy in the mill deck, and just the power of the mill deck in general, right? Even in game 1, where it didn't go exactly according to plan because we had to prematurely activate a card destruction, we were still able to win pretty convincingly. Like, there wasn't really any point in the game where it seemed like our opponent had control of the game. We were just able to control it so completely. And when we did get bad cards, we were just able to draw 2 better cards off of our card destruction. So it's just incredibly, incredibly powerful deck. And I'm going to show off one more duel with this deck tomorrow probably. But I just wanted to first show this version of the matchup, because I do think that Tribute Aggro is the strongest matchup against Stall Mill. So I just wanted to show Stall Mill being able to just utterly trounce its strongest opponent. But that's going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed this sort of video, please be sure to check out the other videos on the channel, check out the guides, check out the other duels in this format. There are much better duels in this format, believe me. And if you have any suggestions for any other videos you want to see, any other matchups you want me to showcase, or if you have any ideas to make any of these decks better, or any new deck ideas potentially, please let me know down in the comments below. But until next time, I've been Ben with YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.